Hello YouTube, Goddard's Radio Mosky here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. I'm still here visiting my friends Daniel and Johanna in Bamberg, and this is another beer that's their recommendation. Johanna says she really loves this beer, and Daniel, who I said in the last video, has a really good knowledge of the beer in this region. This is one that he says is one of the really kind of best and sort of well blended flavoured ones here, so I'm quite looking forward to doing the review of this guy for you. So we're going to look at the Brauerei Huppendorfer, and we'll look at the Vollbier for this guy. As I say, a very kind of popular beer with my friends here. So as is usual with my beer reviews, we'll go through the history of the brewery. I will warn you, this is quite a long history, so I'm going to put like a little bubbler thing up here, so click on that if you want to just go towards the tasting part of the video. I think I'm going to include that in my videos from now on, just so you can get to the tasting quickly if that's what you want. As is usual, the brewery website is in the video description, so check that out if you are interested, and also the link to my other Bamberg beer reviews is there as well, so have a look at those if you are interested, particularly in this region's beer. So this brewery is from the tiny village of Huppendorf, which has a population of only 140 people, and the village is actually located just to the north of Nuremberg, about halfway between the cities of Bamberg in the west and Bayreuth to the east. Now, the history of the brewery apparently goes back to the year 1750, which was also a very important year for the Grasser family, who were the pioneers of art in this little village, the pioneers of brewing in this little village. And apparently, though, there was more recent research into the history of the brewery, and it showed that it's actually more than 500 years old. But the brewery apparently assumed the name Huppendorfer Brauhaus in the year 1688, and in 1742, Mary Diepold married into the Grasser family. She married Pankratz Grasser Kotzendorf, and she took over the running of the business and actually built the estate at Huppendorf number 25. But apparently they're not sure about the changes that were made to the property of the brewery over the following 3 generations of the Grasser family, and but they suspect really at this time that they were investing heavily in the agricultural side of things during this time. But Albert Grasser, who was born in March 1782, apparently had 7 children, and he divided the estate amongst these 2 eldest sons, Johann and Pankratz, and Johann got the control of the Brauhaus, and Pankratz took over the running of some of the different beer halls that the family owned. Now, in April 1896, Jakob Gratzer, the son of Johann, took over the property of the brewery, and that same month he got married to Katharina Kotzendorf, and in April 1899 she went on to give him his first son. But apparently this marriage didn't work out so well, and after court proceedings, Jakob actually invested in the brewery and built a restaurant and a house for himself as well. Now, this new brewhouse apparently had a fermentation cellar which was only used during the winter time, because in the summer he could only ferment the beer in the cool basement rocks due to the outdoor temperature, and at that time obviously other cooling methods didn't exist. But the brewhouse was apparently a very heavy investment for the company, and apparently their original brewing apparatus was made entirely of wood, but this was later converted to copper when they bought new equipment from the Ziegendorf brewery, who had gone bankrupt. But this was done under Johann Grasser, and in 1858 the capacity of the brewery was actually 4,000 litres, and they apparently still used the wooden cooling apparatus from this old setup with the new copper kettles. But their next brewhouse apparently had a capacity of 5,200 litres, and this brewhouse remained in operation until 1966. But during the years after the First World War, the brewery focused more on improving their farming methods for raw materials, and during the years of hyperinflations in Germany, apparently a litre of beer from the Huppendorfer brewery cost 500 billion marks. If those of you know the history, you'll know that Germany printed more money, and just their economy just really went to downhill, and then in the 1930s it started to recover. But in December 1924, the brewery apparently invented kerosene lamps that could be ignited by electric current, and that they used that to heat their kettles up. And then in 1927, Jakob actually died of a long-standing heart ailment, and his wife Katharina actually inherited the estate, and then her eldest son took over the running of the brewery business. Now, Katharine passed the brewery, as I mentioned, to her eldest son Johann, who had been working on their farm for a number of years due to his father's injury that he picked up in the First World War. And apparently he never learned to brew through schooling, but he was assisted with the farm. He went on and basically brewed himself, and then he was assisted in the farm work by his brother Martin. But their mother died in the year 1928 in December, and then in 1929 they actually purchased a grist mill, which became a sort of holy grail, if you like, to the brewery for making their malts and things like that. And they managed to increase, these brothers managed to increase their sales to 700 hectolitres per annum, which helped the brewery massively. And they were also granted the right to grow their own materials on their land. And they also, during their reign, they introduced electricity to the brewery, which reduced the workload dramatically. And later, after the birth of his first son in 1931, he implemented an automatic pump system to bring water into the brewery. But apparently this was originally done by their own well system that they had, and was quite a lot of work. But the brewery continued to operate during the Second World War, but the Allies took the village of Huppendorf in mid-April 1945, and the family actually had to flee their farm. But when Johann returned to the farm, he found that his safe was emptied, and there was a tax bill for 1,500 Reichsmarks which was still there, and this led to a huge dispute with the tax office, which led into 1946, because he was trying to tell them that the American soldiers had stolen his money, and they of course claimed that they hadn't done that. But Johann apparently served as deputy mayor from 1941 and 1945, and as a result of this he was tried, he was in the Nuremberg trials, and he was actually convicted of for being involved with National Socialism, although he was never actually a member of the Nazi party from what it says on the website there. But he was actually charged with this in 1947, and his wife Anna was actually acquitted of all guilt during this period. But Johann actually sent his son Michael to learn about brewing, and he learned at the Weiße Rosenbier, the White Rose Brewery in Hohlfeld, and he later returned to Huppendorf in 1962 after receiving his master's certificate in Bayreuth. Now at this time they had introduced cool storage properly for the first time and made major improvements to the water source of the brewery. And in 1963 Michael actually married his wife from the Forst Liberos family, and their family actually helped out quite a lot with the brewery, and his wife supported him a lot. And she actually delivered the beer for the brewery during this time, and also helped out on the farm as well. So it seems like she was a really good wife to this guy. But another member of the family, Hans, who was Michael's uncle, was actually honoured by the Chamber of Crafts in Bayreuth for his 36-year participation in the brewery's activities, although he'd never actually been formally schooled. But in 1965, a new brewery was constructed, and Michael actually recruited some apprentices. This included Duttmann Bernhardt, and I think he was with the brewery for a very, very long time, and he was the first, and apparently he was very, very talented, obviously why he's remained with the brewery for such a long time. But the brewery was re-equipped during this time with Kasper Schultz brewing equipment, and they also introduced a proper brewing plant, and they also scaled down their agricultural operations during this period to focus more on the brewery influence, and they bought a fleet of vans to distribute their beer around this time, and they were assisted by Gunther Heidenreich, who was actually he's been with the brewery still to this day apparently, and they were supplied with new equipment from the Laubanger brewery as well during this period. Sorry about my little kind of slip there. But yeah, apparently in the 1970s the brewery continued to train new apprentices. This included Sebastian Humer and Josef Amschler. I believe the pronunciation is correct there. But Josef Amschler actually never finished his training due to his death in a car accident. And during that period as well, they also introduced a new state-of-the-art bottling facility. And during this decade, Willibald Grasser was actually the brewmaster of the Heubner Bräu in Steinfeld, and he later returned to the brewery. And Rudi Arnold is another one who also deserves a mention during this period as well. He joined the company and is actually still the driver of the brewery beer vans to this day, one of the head drivers. But in 1982, their current boss Heinrich actually began his apprenticeship with Bernhard Duttmann in the brewery during a period of continual investment from Michael Grasser. But they also purchased the Wallisburg brewery during this period and started to produce snaps and later lemonades and colas. These were also mixed with the beer, and this range is expanded and apparently did help the brewery through some tough financial period. But they apparently also installed an oil burner in the brewery for the first time in the very late 1980s, and previously they'd actually felled wood from their own forests to basically heat up their kettles and things like that. But another Johann Grasser, another descendant of the original guy, he joined the brewery after completing his master's certificate in Upper Franconia as well in the late 1980s. But Hubertus Grasser also joined the brewery. So as you can see, it's a very family-run organisation. And Hubertus Grasser joined the brewery after completing his studies in Erlangen, which is just close here to Bamberg. And then Christian Grasser also arrived to work under Johann, and they recruited another journeyman brewer called Stefan Werner from the famous beer town of Kulmbach, where I actually was just the other day. Now in the 1990s, the brewery was refitted, and they actually had a new additional beer hall built to increase their capacity, and they also sold their old grist mill, which I mentioned to you was bought back in 1929 by Johann Grasser Senior. And they also built a new malt silo, a huge big thing, and changed the wood-fired preheater into a hot water tank, which they would use to then heat their wort. In 1999, they also produced their first Hefeweizen beer with the assistance of the Deinlein Brewery in Bamberg, and then they sold their equipment to the Eichhorn Brewery and brought some new equipment from the Schultz Company, and also introduced a new bottling facility. So that's your kind of long-winded history, if you like, of the Huppendorfer Grasser Brauerei. And as you can see, really, it's a very traditional Franconian brewery, a hugely family-run operation, and apparently their beer is only sold in the surrounding 50 kilometres of the brewery, and it actually has a guest house as well where you can stay. All their ingredients are locally sourced, and of course all the beer is brewed in accordance with the German Reinheitsgebot. So without further ado, let's get on with the tasting of this guy. I'll bring up the camera and let you just have a closer look at the brewery bottle there. As you can see, the light's just hitting that there. You can see it's actually quite a classical one here. You can see it says just in this crest here, Zeit 1750, which is, as I mentioned, this is when they originally thought the brewery started, but they found new evidence that it was actually earlier than that the brewery started. So you can see here, nice sort of Vollbier label on it. The bottle top just has the same crest that's on the bottle there. I'm not sure how well you can see it. I'll just put my hand over. I think the light's coming in the window. You can just see there, it's got the nice red crest on it there. Maybe I'll bring that up in the camera just a little bit later on. But let's get this guy open and see how we get on with it. It's a what percent was it? It's a 5% land beer, a sort of Vollbier. So it's a very kind of usually quite a bready one, and also quite a good bit of hoppy character in here. It's a style of beer that is actually unique, or kind of more well known in the Franconia region, in fact. So let's get this guy out into the glass. So it's 5% on the Richter scale, and we'll see how we get on here. It's actually quite a bit darker than I thought it was going to be. It's going to have a nice big German head on this guy. Very typical for the Germans to want big heads on their beer. It's actually quite a bit darker than I suspected it would be. But as you can see, very clear. If I hold my fingers to the back of this glass, you can see right through. A lot of little bubbles coming up to the top there. There's maybe even a four-fingered head on this guy. Definitely white and frothy, not off-white at all. In terms of the aroma here, I'll just swoosh it up a little bit. A big malty nose. It's actually really grassy and grainy with a little bit of herbal character in there too. That's the first thing that comes out on the more sharp end of the nose. But yeah, quite grassy actually. But it's big and malty as well. I'm picking up a lot of bread when you kind of take it in a bit more kind of deeply actually. It's quite hard to swirl this around with such a big head on it. But yeah, it's quite malty and quite bready. You've got some yeasty character, I think, in there as well. Maybe even just a little hint of caramel. But the grassy notes in this one are definitely quite prominent. Definitely a big grassy nose to this guy. So let's just get the rest of it out and we'll get on with the tasting. But quite a malty one, quite grassy, nice bready elements too. Usually, in my experience, the Vollbiers are kind of quite more bready beers actually, like a land beer. So we'll see how we get on with this guy. But yeah, really attractive looking beer actually. It looks really good in the Hefeweizen glass. It actually looks a hell of a lot like a crystal Hefeweizen this way, but we'll see how we get on. Usually you get the massive head with the Hefeweizens, but let's see how we get on. Just need to take off some of the head of this. It's actually does have a good bit of kind of toasted character to it. A toasted bready malt character is what's coming out first. You can see the head of this guy is actually going down as you drink it quite quickly. But yeah, it's actually very toasted, and you've got a nice you've got a really nice underlying caramel flavour there. It really blends quite well, in fact. But yeah, really nice roasted caramel element is what's opening up here, and there's a little bit of spice character there that's kind of sitting on the middle of the tongue, and it complements it really, really well. I see what Daniel meant about this one. It's actually a very kind of well balanced flavour beer, and you can just get the kind of grassy character at the end of it as well. It really is quite a well done beer in that sense. It is very, very well balanced. Yeah, really nice. It's really, the bready and caramel really is beautifully mixed in this beer. I can see why this brewery is so famous if it can produce beer like this, and also if this particular beer itself, it is really, really well done. Yeah, beautifully balanced malt base, nice roasted caramel element to it as well. Maybe not even any earthy character, it is all the caramel. The roasted part of the beer is actually really sweet. There's not that earthy underline that you sometimes get with these things. It's really, really well done. On the end you're getting slightly herbal and grassy hops, and these are quite prominent in the aftertaste, but it's more on the front of the tongue. On the back of the tongue you are getting that beautiful bready roasted caramel malt base. It's beautifully done, I have to say. Very, very good beer. There's not much more you can say about it. It's awesome. It really is an awesome beer. Pardon me, but it's blended really well. The grassy hops and the caramel malt base are really done quite well. It's more light bodied than I would expect from a Vollbier. I'd expect a Vollbier to be more mid bodied, but this guy is actually quite drinkable, and the flavour, like I say, is really well balanced. It's slightly dry, I would say, too. But the carbonation is actually really soft on it. It almost feels like it doesn't have any, actually. It's quite well done. You just get a teeny tiny bit of it on the front of the tongue when you take this beer in, and then it's completely smooth. It's got that typical German smoothness to it, and it's even more prominent in these Franconian beers, in fact. But it's actually quite light for the style as well. Like I say, it maybe should be just a little bit more heavier in terms of the body, but you know, who cares? The flavour of it is absolutely beautiful. The malt base in this is one of the best I've tasted when I've been here in Germany, so check this guy out if you get the chance. Really, it's an awesome beer. Yeah, really beautiful beer, I have to say. Check this guy out if you get the chance, honestly. This is one of the best ones I've had since I've been here in Germany. But if you like if you're like me and you like a beer that has a nice massive bready base to it, and the caramel in this one is blended in really well with even just a little hint of spice character, and you're getting that little hoppy, grassy, citrusy bite on the end of it. It's really well done, really well balanced flavour. The grassy elements are just kind of nice in the front of the tongue and the aftertaste, and that really doughy bread, toasted caramel flavour is just sitting on the back of the tongue nicely. It's got a really beautiful aftertaste, I have to say. So if you're really into German beer and this kind of bready, hellish style beer, you know, check this guy out. It really is well done. So I hope you found my ramblings again on this beer really useful. I highly recommend you check out the Huppendorfer brewery. The locals here in Bamberg and in Franconia, I think this is a really awesome brewery, and if they love it, you know, most people coming from outside of Germany and Franconia, and for that matter, will actually really enjoy this beer. If you do happen to have tried this guy, please let me know your own thoughts on it. Always interesting to hear other people's thoughts on the beer I'm reviewing. I hope you've enjoyed this review, like I say, and please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Germans, if you're watching, I apologise for my bad pronunciation of some of your place names and stuff like that, but it is kind of quite confusing when you're just sort of starting to learn German. Hopefully I'm more fluent in the future and won't make these mistakes. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I will be back soon with another one. Cheers.